Hello, everyone. Welcome to our parent chat on grit and gratitude. I'm so glad that you've taken the time out of your busy day, your busy lives to be here to have this really important discussion. We know these words are thrown around a lot of grit and gratitude, but we're going to talk about what it means, how to bring it into your life, and we're going to talk about reality here. We can't always be thankful every minute of the day and grateful, and we can't always have that grit that we hope we have, but our wonderful guest speaker is going to talk about grit and gratitude in a way that we can understand and that we can really bring it into our homes, because this is something we have to work on and be mindful of. As a reminder, I'm Coach Sherry. I'm the founder of Teen Wise, but I'm a very happy volunteer here at the Balance and Mind program. And I'm just happy that all of you are here with us and that I can be here to facilitate this discussion. So Pam, welcome, and we'll go ahead and invite you on screen so we can do a quick introduction.
Hey,
All right,
everybody.
there we go.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
It's great to be here, Sherry. Thank you so much for the invitation. Sherry and I met last fall when we were doing another session together, speaking to another group of parents. And it's really great to reconnect with you, Sherry, and to meet all of you this evening. Um, just a little bit about me. I was actually trained as a neuroscientist. So my study of positive emotions, things like gratitude, go back. I've spent about 25 years now studying the relationship between, um, well, really, I started out as a stress researcher. So I was studying the effects of, the stress that we experience in life and how that can lead to some of the challenges that we have in the world today, things like depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. What's interesting about the stress literature is that we know that there are other tools that we can use, mental tools that we can use to mitigate some of this stress and some of the repercussions of stress. And gratitude is one of those things. The title of my talk is Grit and Gratitude, because really where we're going to start here is um, the relationship between um, grit and the positive emotion of gratitude. So, grit is a mindset, right? It is our decision that we are going to persevere even when life is really, really difficult. Grit is related to another word, another term that gets thrown out a lot when we're talking about, psychological terms, and that term is resilience. You probably have heard of that term too, resilience. So resilience, of course, is our emotional buoyancy. It's our ability to sort of bounce back when we have gone through something really challenging. So I think about the relationship between these two terms, grit and resilience, in this way. Sometimes life hits us really, really hard, to the point where we feel like we just get knocked down to the ground and we get the wind just knocked right out of us. That's how hard some of the things that we go through feel to us. And what resilience is our ability to stand back up after those really, really tough times. But the thing is, there has to be something that motivates us to stand back up. And that motivating factor is usually grit, because grit is our decision that we're going to stand back up. So the way I think about these two terms is um, resilience is our emotional capacity to get back to our feet after we've gone through something really challenging. But grit is the decision that we make that we are going to stand back up. But the question is, how do we go about building these wonderful tools that are going to prevent us from experiencing some of the, emotional repercussions of stress, things like depression and anxiety? Well, one tool that we can use that is very powerful in building our grit and our resilience is gratitude. And to illustrate that point, I'm going to tell you just a really quick story. It actually starts back in the days when I was in grad school. This was over 20 years ago now. Can't believe it's been that long ago, but yeah, it's been 20 years. So over 20 years ago, there was another psychologist. Her name was Barbara Fredrickson, and she was actually starting a research study studying the how different college students handle stress in their environment, how they handle the pressures of classroom work and the pressures of being out on their own for the first time, all of the things that college students have to go through when they leave home for the first time. So Barbara Fredrickson is actually one of the founding members of a group of psychologists who study something called positive psychology. And resilience is one of the things that they study. So she was trying to understand the characteristics of resilience in this group of college students. Well, she got about halfway through her plan to study on this group of college students, and we had a national crisis happen to us here in the United States. That's when 9/11 hit. And since she was right in the middle of the study, Barbara was she was in a quandary. She didn't know what to do about this particular study, because she didn't know if she should continue the study at that point, or she should just shut everything down because there was so much turmoil going on in our country at that time. Well, she realized that this provided an opportunity for her to study resilience as it was being played out in a crisis situation for these college students. And she decided actually to continue the study. And what she did was she went back and she re-interviewed all of these students that she had interviewed beforehand. She went back and she asked them specifically how they were dealing with this particular crisis situation. And the responses that she got would not be any surprise to any of us, because these college students were feeling the same thing that we were feeling at the time. They were feeling fearful and very sad and um, worried and anxious and angry, all this mix of negative emotions in the wake of this national tragedy. And a lot of them were experiencing some of the more serious repercussions of stress and crisis. They were starting to experience symptoms of clinical depression and clinical anxiety. But there were a group of students who seemed to be they seemed to be doing a little bit better. Quoting her actual research paper, Fredrickson said, "Within this dense cloud of anguish at the time, there was a silver lining that was shimmering." Well, what was that silver lining? The silver lining for Barbara and for these students was a set of positive emotions that these students were using, the most resilient of these students were using, to mitigate their mental anguish following this national tragedy. And gratitude was one of the most powerful of those positive emotions. So the most resilient of these college students were saying they were specifically going through exercises every day to tell themselves and other people around them what they were grateful for. They were choosing to count their blessings. They were choosing during that horrific time to stay close to people and to show people how much they appreciated and cared about those relationships in their lives. Quoting Barbara again, she said, "Positive emotions, gratitude being one of them, were the critical active ingredients that helped resilient people thrive despite emotional blows that they were experiencing." And the thing is, this is not just a one-off research finding that just happened once in the whole history of, research around this area. Whenever we are a tragedy or a crisis event, things like when we go into war-torn countries, cities where there are missiles or bombs that are constantly being dropped in those locations around the world, or when we go to a place that has just had some sort of, catastrophic natural disaster, we find a subgroup of people that seem to be handling that crisis a little bit better than everybody else. And one of the key characteristics of that group of people is they nurture positive emotions, gratitude being one of them. We've actually seen this same phenomenon happening with a recent crisis that has happened globally, which is COVID-19, of course. Now, we know that even prior to the pandemic hitting, there was already a concern about our young people. There was already a concern that mental health in youth was suffering. We knew that approximately in the United States, there are about maybe 4 out of every 10 American high school students who are suffering with feelings of sadness and hopelessness at least once in a while. And maybe 2 out of every 10 are suffering with more severe symptoms, feelings of suicidal thoughts, perhaps. Well, during COVID, Our high school students were under even more stress, as we all were, but they were facing things, of course, like the schools shutting down and them trying to figure out how they were going to figure out how to learn during this time. And they had social isolation, which was very difficult. Their families were undergoing some economic hardships. People were getting laid off, losing their jobs. There was fear, of course, of losing family members due to illness, and there was reduced access to healthcare for some of these students. So a lot of, more extreme challenges were coming their way during this particular crisis. So of course, there were a lot of research studies that were being done on our youth as well as adult populations during that time. And there was one study that was done on 8,000 high school students across the country. And what they found in this particular study was feeling socially connected to other people in their friend group during COVID cut these feelings of hopelessness and suicidal thoughts by 50%. And that's no joke. I mean, that's a huge percentage to be able to cut these difficult emotional repercussions of crisis and stress. Okay, but what was the impetus? What was the motivation for them to stay socially connected? Well, it turned out that gratitude was a motivator for these students to stay socially connected. What they found was these grateful high school students, they weren't spending any more or less time on social media than any other high school student. But grateful high school students were going on social media with a very specific purpose in mind. They were going on social media, connecting with their friends, chatting with their friends, using, all sorts of social media platforms with the express intent to try to keep those social connections as strong as they could be during this time where we were all feeling isolated. But they were going on there making sure that they were having meaningful conversations, trying to keep those bonds as close as they could with their friends. So again, this just illustrates the fact that nurturing a sense of gratitude has these repercussions that happen in our mental and emotional health that protect us during times of crisis. So what I'm going to do now in this presentation is I'm going to sort of walk through some sort of brain science behind why we think gratitude is so powerful. We'll talk about what it looks like, how it affects the brain, and then we will talk about some exercises that we use to try to develop a sense of gratitude. So one of the sort of premier researchers for gratitude in the United States is his name is Robert Emmons. He is actually a psychologist at University of California, Davis. And he has described 3 key steps to how gratitude happens in the brain. The first thing that happens is we recognize that something has happened that's positive in our environment. We've been given a gift, or there has been some benefit that we've been shown, and we know that that is something that we didn't necessarily, initiate. That was something that happened outside of ourselves, something that was given to us. And then the second thing that happens is we receive that gift or that benefit. We intellectually acknowledge that there is some value that's been provided to us. And we know that there's some sort of positive value to that particular gift or benefit. And then in the third step of gratitude, what happens is we move sort of from thinking about this to actually feeling something about it. So this is where we react to this gift or benefit. And this is the warm and fuzzy feeling side. We move from, figuratively speaking, we move from our head to our heart in this stage where we feel happy and we feel grateful and we appreciate this gift or benefit that's been given to us. So we can see here that gratitude engages both the thinking and the feeling parts of the brain. And there have been lots of research studies where people are actually put into brain scanners, and then the researchers will ask those people when they're in the brain scanner, okay, think about something that you're grateful for. And then they watch to see what parts of the brain will light up as we participate in an exercise of gratitude. And what we've noticed is that there are all sorts, the brain just lights up like a Christmas tree or a fireworks display. There are areas all over the brain that start to light up as we are participating in gratitude. And some of these won't be any surprise to us, as we are like seeing things or hearing things, witnessing things. Of course, the areas of the brain that are involved in taking in that sensory input, they're going to light up, as well as the parts where we are sort of reacting in surprise at something that we weren't expecting. It would make sense for that part of the brain to also light up. If it's something that's positive and we really appreciate it, then the reward pathways of the brain will also light up, and that will cause the release of these, feel good chemicals that make us feel really, really nice and warm and fuzzy inside. But there are also parts of the brain that are involved in sort of like understanding the value of that thing, right? The parts of the brain that are involved in logic and analytical reasoning and planning that take a look at that and say, that's a really nice benefit that I'm receiving. So those parts of the brain also light up. And one particular area of the brain that I'm thinking of is the prefrontal cortex, the part that's right behind the forehead. This is the brain center for analysis and reason. And here's where gratitude gets really, really interesting, because the prefrontal cortex is also massively connected to other brain areas that are involved in things like regulating our emotions, regulating our reactivity to stress and to pain. And so now we start to get glimpses of into the neural mechanisms of how gratitude helps us in times of difficulty, because it can actually change the way the brain reacts to stress and to pain. And it also changes the way we interact with other people. When we are gratitude, when we consistently participate in gratitude, the brain will actually change in structure and in function, so that we start to react with more empathy to other people. We start to understand other people. We start to, like those high school students, we start to engage more with other people and try to strengthen our connections with other people. And we also start to invest in trying to make other people feel good around us. So we tend to be more altruistic, and we are also very much interested in paying it forward. If we're grateful, we try to do things for other people to show our appreciation for them as well. I like the way that Robert Emmons wrote this in a book that he recently wrote with a group of colleagues on the on gratitude. And he wrote in this book, "Gratitude is fertilizer for the mind, spreading connections and improving its function in nearly every realm of existence." So because gratitude is such a powerful form of fertilizer for the brain, it's really no wonder then that it can impact us in a lot of different, very wonderful ways. So what research tells us is that gratitude can help us feel good. It can decrease our sensitivity to stress and pain. And it is one of the most reliable ways that we know of to boost things like a sense of happiness, a sense of satisfaction in life, a sense of optimism and joy and enthusiasm. It's also a very powerful way to help us when we're struggling with symptoms of anxiety and depression. So there have been research studies that have shown that if you take two populations of patients who are struggling with symptoms of clinical anxiety and clinical depression, one group of those patients undergo the regular therapies that we all know that have their own merits, right? Any any number of the drugs that we take, and also things like cognitive behavioral therapy and those sorts of things. If you have those group of patients, and then you compare them to a group of patients that take all of those good therapies, but then they add a component of gratitude, where they exercise and they participate in exercises of gratitude every day. The patients who actually participate and they exercise gratitude every day, they actually have better outcomes than the patients who don't. We are also healthier when we practice gratitude. And this is not only because we have decreased sensitivity to stress and pain, but it's also that grateful people tend to take care of themselves more. When we have this sense of optimism and hope and enthusiasm for the future, then we see ourselves in that future, and we tend to want to take care of ourselves better. It motivates us to take care of ourselves. So we eat better, we exercise more, we keep up with our regular checkups that we're supposed to have every year. We avoid risky behaviors, and we avoid risky substances that we know will impair our health. So gratitude makes us feel better. We have less aches and pains. We have less health issues. We sleep better, and we also participate more in self-care. Gratitude also boosts our internal drive to help ourselves. And also, like I said before, it boosts our sense of altruism so that we are more interested in helping others. And the really great thing about that is that it also results in stronger relationships. Gratitude creates sort of a virtuous cycle in our relationships where because we are more invested in those relationships, we put more trust and generosity into those relationships. The other person in the relationship is going to respond in kind with more appreciation and trust. So it builds greater and stronger social bonds in that way. Now, here are some research findings that are specific for middle school age students and for high school students. What we know is that more grateful students, they have stronger connections with their family, with their friends, with their colleagues at school, and so on. And when researchers follow students over time, what they notice is that as feelings of gratitude grow, as students exercise, they practice the attitude of gratitude, so do all of these pro-social behaviors that are going to help them in social settings and help them in school. They are more likely to help classmates. They are more likely to stick up for peers. And they are also less likely to participate in antisocial behaviors, things like bullying, things like being mean to others, or participating in things that would be hurtful to themselves or other people. We know because they have this sense of hope and enthusiasm and optimism for the future that this boosts their motivation. They are more invested in their own future. And so the way it plays out for high school students is they generally make better grades. They're more invested in their academic performance than students who are not grateful. It also encourages giving back. Grateful students are more likely to be participating in their communities. And it promotes, just like it does for the rest of us, healthy behaviors, protects against risky ones. Healthy high school students tend to sleep better, they tend to eat better, they tend to not indulge in risky behaviors and indulge in risky substances. And it also helps, like I said before, it helps them to reframe some of the crisis situations that they've been through in order to boost things like resilience and growth and grit. There has been sort of a theory that has been around. It's an ancient thought. It's not something that I or any one of my colleagues in the world of psychology or neuroscience, we haven't come up with this. It's been around for a very long time. So 2000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, who was a Stoic philosopher, he was also one of the Roman emperors, he wrote, "The soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts." And I think that is so true. And we have repeated that thought in our research papers. And the way Robert Emmons and his colleagues wrote the same thought is they said, the brain takes the shape the mind rests upon. Rest your mind upon worry, sadness, annoyance, and irritability, and it will begin to take the shape of anxiety, depression, and anger. That is so, so true for many of us. Ask your brain to give thanks, and it will get better at finding things to be grateful for and begin to take the shape of gratitude. So far we've talked about how gratitude benefits us, what it looks like in the brain, how it can build within us a sense of optimism and a sense of resiliency and grit. Now, the rest of our time to talk more practically about some nuts and bolts exercises to practice gratitude on a daily basis. Some of these may be things that you already are aware of, and some of them might be new exercises, but just sort of wanted to give you a smattering of what some exercises could look like in this area. The first one is just a gratitude journal. And this is probably something that you've all heard of before. It's a simple exercise, but it's also very easy to do. And it's also a very powerful way to have a daily reminder of the things that we're grateful for. So the idea here, of course, is to reflect on 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for. A gratitude journal is not something that you have to do every day, but it is important to be consistent about it. So you want to make sure that you are doing it, 3 to 5 times a week at the minimum, so that you are nurturing this habit, this attitude of gratitude on a regular basis. Now, some of us may have difficulty starting a gratitude journal because we're just not sure what to write about. And so it's perfectly fine to start with some prompts if that would be helpful. You can write on a separate list of paper that you just insert in the back of your journal and give yourself some prompts like, I'm grateful for 3 things that I heard today. Or what are 3 things that I heard today that I'm grateful for? What are 3 things that I saw today that I'm grateful for? What are 3 things that I smelled today that I'm grateful for, or that I tasted, or that I touched? Um, what are 3 animals or birds that I'm grateful for? What are 3 friends that I'm grateful for? Who are the 3 teachers that I'm grateful for? Who are the 3 men I'm grateful for? Who are the 3 family members that I'm grateful for? What are 3 things about my home or my family that I'm grateful for? Who are 3 people at work? Who are 3 colleagues that I'm grateful for? So you on a list of prompts that would sort of get your creative juices flowing to help you with your gratitude journal, if that would be helpful. And it's also perfectly fine to talk about the things in our life that we're grateful for, a good meal or the warm sunshine, especially when we're in the middle of winter and it's rainy and blustery or snowy and blustery outside. Of course, we're all going to be grateful for inanimate things like sunshine. We'll be grateful for I don't know, a great meal that we have. So those are perfectly wonderful things to be grateful for. But the things that we write down in our gratitude journal that actually sort of have the most powerful impact on our emotional health are not things, but they're actually people. So if we have things that other people have done for us that instill in us and elicit in us a sense of feeling loved and appreciated, these are going to have the greatest impacts on our mental health. So write about whatever it is that you're grateful, but at least every time that you have a journal entry, try to write about at least one person who has impacted you in a positive way. And like I said, be consistent about it. And it could be helpful also to follow up your gratitude journal entry with actually a public thank you. So you could actually, and we'll talk about this in a minute, you could write that person a note, write them an email, or actually drop by their office or their house or whatever and tell them, hey, I was just thinking about you the other day, and I was thinking about something specific that I'm really grateful for. I just wanted to share it with you. There's also a way that you can participate in a whole community of people who are feeling grateful. You see that there's a link to an online gratitude journal down there. And if you're interested in getting that link, I can share it with you after our session this evening. A lot of the exercises that I'm sharing with you come from a website that you'll see in the lower left-hand corner. So there's a lot of really great exercises out there for practicing the attitude of gratitude. As we think about conveying our gratitude specifically for other people and what they've done for us, there are ways to amplify that sense of gratitude, because oftentimes all we think to do, right? And there's nothing wrong with this, but all we think to do is say, hey, that was a really nice thing you did. Thanks so much. And we sort of leave it at that. But what Robert Emmons and other psychologists have recommended is there are ways to sort of deepen that experience of gratitude. And there are 3 specific ways to deepen our sense of gratitude about what other people have done. The first way to deepen our sense of gratitude is to notice people's intentions as they are providing a gift or a benefit to us. Gratitude grows when we know that people help us not by accident or not because it's convenient for them, but because they care about us. So, can you think of a time when someone noticed that you needed something or remembered something that you care about, and then they went out of their way to provide that thing for you? How do you know that people are helping you on purpose? And how do you feel when you know that people are going out of their way? They're doing something intentionally and on purpose to help you. It deepens your sense of gratitude to know that. The next way to deepen your sense of gratitude is to appreciate the cost that people pay of their time, their energy, in order to provide that gift or that benefit or that service to us. So, gratitude will grow when we realize and we appreciate that there is a personal cost attached to things that people do for us. So, what are some things a family member or a friend have given up in order to help you out? And then the third way to deepen that sense of gratitude is to recognize the value of that gift or that benefit. Gratitude grows when we recognize that we have been deeply benefited. So when someone helps us, remember that this is a gift that they're bestowing to us. And we can react to that gift with appreciation by focusing on the personal value, something what's different about my life as a result of what that person has done for us. So as you think about writing your journal entries and you think about reflecting on what other people have done for you, think about these three steps. And I'll just give you a very brief um, example of what I mean, something from my own life. This is nothing really earth shattering, but it's just an example that I thought of. Last weekend, it was a very busy weekend for both me and my husband. We had a lot of things going on our Sunday. Both of us had quite a few um, just household responsibilities that we were trying to take care of. It's tax season, so I don't know if many of you can relate, but we're trying to pull together all of our paperwork. Well, my husband did a very kind and thoughtful thing. It's been a while since he and I have gone out on a date. We're kind of bad about doing that when we get stressed and busy. So he went out of his way to drive about a half an hour away to this restaurant that he knows that I really, really like. I especially really like their desserts. So he took time out of his Sunday, even though it was a busy day for him, to do that. And so the way I sort of stepped through these three ways to deepen gratitude was I noticed his intent. He didn't have to do this. It was something purposeful that he did to make my weekend a little bit brighter in the midst of a very busy, very stressful time. There was a personal cost. He did not have that time to spend on some of the projects that he had in mind. He had some gardening to do. He did a little bit less of that so that he could go out and get me a takeout meal with a special dessert. And the value of that gift was that he brought it home and we sat down at the table. We had a really nice hour or yeah, it was probably an hour that we sat down and had a nice meal together. So it was a benefit to us, taking us out of a very busy day. It was also a benefit to our relationship because we got to spend some quality time together. So just a way of thinking about deepening our sense of gratitude. Here's another exercise to keep in mind: gratitude letters. Something again that you might have thought of doing, but just here's a specific way to sort of structure the letter. In the first part of a gratitude letter, you can tell the person what they did, how it impacted you, how it made you feel, and why that was important to you. You can step through those three amplifiers or deepeners of gratitude and tell them what it meant to you. And then in part two, you describe what this act of kindness says about them. You describe the impact that that gift or benefit had on your relationship. And for some added zest, if you really want to knock someone's socks off, you can actually do this as a surprise for someone who's not expecting it and actually drive over to their office or their house and read it to them in person. Here's some other exercises for practicing the attitude of gratitude. Some people like to have a gratitude jar where they have a box or a jar. They will decorate that jar. It's probably not something that I would do because I'm not a very good artist, not gifted in that way. But decorate a jar and keep it in your house somewhere where you're going to see it every day. And every day, try to think of at least three things that you're grateful for and write each one of those things on a slip of paper and put it in the jar. And here's what I like about this particular exercise. What you can do is when you are having a very busy day, a very stressful day, or you're having a down day where you just need a little bit of a pick me up, you can pull out some of those slips of paper and read what you wrote. So this is a way to remind yourself of who and what is good in your life that you can be grateful for. There's another exercise called the gratitude rock, where you find a rock or an object that has some special value to you, something pretty, something that you would like to carry around in your pocket or leave somewhere where you're going to see it. It could also be a piece of jewelry, like a necklace, a locket, or a special bracelet of some sort, something tactile that you can actually touch and see and feel on a regular basis. So what you want to do is you want to carry this thing around or wear it. And every time you have the opportunity to look or see this object or touch this object, you just take a moment in touching it or looking at it to think of something that you're thankful for. And then at the end of the day, you can take this object out, whether it's a rock or another special object or a bracelet or a necklace, touch it, and use that moment to bring back to your mind everything that you thought of that you're grateful for during the day. And you can actually also do the same thing the next morning. Touch that object again to start your day immersed in the sense of gratitude for the things that happened in the previous 24 hours that you can be grateful for. Gratitude collage is where you would take a picture of things you're grateful for and then keep those pictures somewhere. I imagine you could even do this with a Pinterest board if you wanted to. But it's a nice classroom exercise as well for students and teachers to take pictures, draw pictures of things that they're grateful for, and then have them displayed somewhere. You can take a look at all those pictures on a regular basis and think of what you're grateful for. And the final exercise that I have for you is the gratitude tree or flower. Again, this is a nice classroom exercise. You just take bits of colored paper. It's a nice exercise to do in the fall or in the spring when we're all looking forward to seeing those beautiful flowers springing up from the ground. But on each petal or leaf, you write the things you're grateful for. So it makes a nice group activity. So again, there are lots of resources out there for gratitude exercises. I just wanted to give you a smattering of some of those exercises here in our session tonight. But the final section that I'd like to talk about is how we can stay grateful even during times of real stress, during times of crisis, perhaps. I started out our session telling you the story of how gratitude was shown to be so powerful in a group of college students during a national crisis. And we also know that gratitude was also really helpful for our high school students during the COVID crisis. So it was also helpful for adults. We saw similar benefits for adults. But it's a worthwhile question to ask. Can gratitude really be helpful during these times of crisis? Yeah, we know it can be helpful during our everyday life and when we're feeling really a little bit down, but what if we're facing real trauma in life? Well, Robert Emmons, in his book that he wrote on gratitude, he wrote the following: I have often been asked if people can or even should feel grateful under dire circumstances. My response is that a grateful attitude will not only help, but is also essential. In fact, it is precisely under crisis conditions when we have the most to gain by a grateful perspective on life. So I think it's important to make a distinction here. I don't think that Robert Emmons is saying here that gratitude is a form of happyology where we have to deny that real suffering exists. I mean, some of us have suffered heavily over the past recent years because of the global pandemic or social unrest, political division. There's war in parts of our world today. There's economic turmoil. And I know in specific local communities, there's also some real suffering that's going on. And to deny that life is sometimes darkened by pain and by sorrow would be unrealistic. And frankly, it would feel unbearable. I mean, imagine a world where suffering exists, but we're never allowed to talk about it. Such a world would feel, to me, it would feel very cruel. So gratitude is not a tool that we have to deny that suffering exists, but gratitude is a tool to reframe loss and pain into a potential gain and to repurpose pain into something that feels more positive and more purpose filled. There's actually another word that I use to describe redeeming something good out of something that can feel inherently bad. And that other word that comes to my mind is grace. When we infuse situations with a sense of gratitude and grace, then all of the rest of this quote becomes possible. It becomes possible that in the face of demoralization, gratitude can have the power to energize us. In the face of brokenness, gratitude has the power to heal. In the face of despair, to bring hope. So let's talk about how to do that. How do we practice gratitude even during times of crisis? When I'm working with clients and they're undergoing some real life crisis events, some real challenges, I ask them to run themselves through a list of questions. And I do this as well when I'm going through something that's particularly challenging and difficult for me. All of these questions have at their basis, if the psychological basis of it is to try to, again, sort of redeem something good out of something negative. So here's some questions that we can ask ourselves. What in this moment can I be grateful for? Can I be grateful for the people that I have in my life? Can I be grateful for my friends and for my colleagues and for my family members that I still have around me during this difficult time? Can I find ways to be thankful for something that's happening to me, even if I'm not grateful for it in the moment? Did this crisis allow us as a community or us as a family or as a group of colleagues to pull together in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise? How could this crisis change my life in a positive way? Can this problem help me grow in patience or persistence or fortitude? How did I meet this challenge in ways that surprised or encouraged me? Did this uncover some inner strengths that I didn't even know I had that I can be grateful for? What lessons did I learn in this crisis? What do I see now that I didn't see before? And I'll tell you for myself and for people that I work with, trauma and crisis tends to pull a couple big life lessons out for us. The first thing is that we tend to see other people's struggles a lot more clearly than we used to. So crisis and trauma, it tends to open our eyes to suffering that may have been going on around us that we weren't paying attention to. In other words, it creates a sense of real empathy for us. And the other life lesson that crisis often gives us is it reconfigures our life priorities. We see them in a different way, or maybe we choose to shake them out in a different way that we didn't before. So what are the lessons you and I can learn from some of the, real shakeups that we experience in life? How do we choose to live life differently in the wake of those things? How am I? How are you? How am I more of the person that I would ultimately want to be because of this crisis situation? Can I find a way to grow in the characteristics of grit and resilience in the wake of this crisis event? Can I grow in a sense of optimism? Can I grow in a sense of self sufficiency? Many people find that when they go through crisis, they need to find the strength. They pull the strength from somewhere to rise and meet that challenge. And what they learn from that is that they do have the strength to deal with even the worst that life can throw at them. And that gives them a sense of confidence that they will be able to handle the next crisis that comes their way as well. I really love a quote from Ernest Hemingway. He once wrote, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong in the broken places." So we often find that when we are in the midst of current adversity, that will stretch and strengthen us to face future adversity. So how might the situation prepare you or me for adversity that we're going to face in the future? And finally, will I be able to help someone else more because of what I've been through? Suffering happens all around us all the time, and sometimes we are not aware of it until we ourselves have suffered. And often, nothing means more to someone who is suffering than the comfort and support of someone else who's been through a similar circumstance. So, are we able to do that? Is that something to be grateful for as we go through challenging events and we learn to convey that empathy to others? Those were my final thoughts this evening on gratitude. And I would be happy to have a little bit more discussion around this topic if you're interested. Um, Please do keep in touch with me. I always love to keep in touch with people. You'll find me mostly on LinkedIn. So look up my LinkedIn profile, and Sherry could probably provide that to you after the session is over. But I just thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share some thoughts on gratitude.
We really appreciate this. Was great. I mean, it's always a great reminder, just gratitude in general, but the way you've presented it really makes it seem possible that we can do it, especially in those moments of crisis.
Hmm.
I thought one of the things that this made me think about in talking about gratitude in crisis is that you're not saying to replace those difficult feelings with gratitude. They are sitting alongside each other. And it just makes those difficult feelings easier to cope with and allows you to the resilience, as you said, to get back up and keep going.
Right. That's such a great way of saying it, Sherry. We never have to deny that we are hurting when we're going through a crisis event. But what we can add along with that hurt is um, an opportunity to grow from that crisis event as well.
I'll share a brief story with everyone, and then I have a question from someone who is attending tonight. Um, an example of this gratitude in very difficult situation. My brother-in-law was in a horrific accident a few years ago. And so there was like 5 days or so where, we had to make some very difficult decisions.
Mm.
And while we're in the hospital, our family was gathering and we were tapping into what you're saying, the gratitude of the moments that we had with him and the stories and the fun times and the memories. And so while we were all reeling with these horrible things going on and the emotions were heavy, we had those brief moments where we could grasp onto that gratitude and even joy in these small moments.
Hmm.
And that helped us to get through those difficult times. So for those of you who may be in a difficult time, I just want to tell you it's not easy, but it makes the situation bearable, and it allows you to just get up and keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank
So
you for sharing that story, Sherry. That's powerful.
so I hope that helps. Someone asked a question, which I work with teens, so hence the name Teen Wise of my company. And somebody said, okay, these are great exercises, Pam, but how do we get our teens or kids? Little ones are easier to get to come in, but how do you get them to do it with you?
Oh, okay. Well, I think I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Sherry. But I think we can't expect our teens to do something that we ourselves are not doing. And so the first thing that I say when people ask me that question is we have to model it first. So from the time that we were not perfect in this by any stretch of the imagination in my own home, in my own family, but we were intentional from the time that our girls were toddlers up and through their teens. And I have one who's, flown the nest now. She's married and starting her own family. And then I have a college age daughter. But all the way through their growing up years, we tried to model gratitude in our home. And the way we did that was different at different sort of like stages of their growth and development. But during their teenage years, we did a couple things. We had a family sort of like powwow every Sunday. We had brunch together every Sunday. That was one of our special family get-togethers. We tried to make time to have brunch together on Sunday. And then after brunch, we would go around the table and each one of us would say something they were grateful for the other family members. So, and then the other like small thing is I've always been very intentional about thanking my husband for things that he's doing around the house, just to sort of convey the idea that we don't take for granted the things that other people are doing for us. We always convey a sense of, gratitude and appreciation for what other people do. So I would say we have to model it and we have to consistently and regularly show gratitude ourselves in order to expect our kids to, sort of do the same.
Yeah.
But Sherry, give me your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, so here's my thoughts. I love what you're saying, to role model it is key. So if your kids are doing chores, to thank them and be
Oh,
grateful for that. And
yep.
chores are a hot topic, I know, for parents who are trying to get their kids to do stuff. Even if they don't do it perfectly, even if they do it after the fifth time you've asked them, to be thankful and show gratitude. The other thing that you can do with teens is sometimes they don't want to do these things that you're asking them when you're watching. So I like the idea of the gratitude jar and the gratitude tree. If you had something like that on your refrigerator, for instance, and you just had little things that you could write and then stick on there, your teen might sneak a few on there while you're not watching, right? But if especially depending on the temperament of your teen, if you come in and say, we're going to do a gratitude tree or we're going to do a gratitude jar, here you go, right now, they might push back. But if you kind of give them the space, like, hey, it's just here around here, you put things that you're grateful for and making sure they're related to your kids on that tree, then they might get into the spirit and do that. The other one is the gratitude journal, the actual journal. Some kids love the act of writing, and they have actually gratitude journals, like to say, like, write 3 things today. That's literally every page is that. You know your kids the best. So if you know that they love that kind of stuff, then maybe that's what you do, is you get them that journal. What does everybody think about that? Do you think you can get your teens to do that? Your little kids, because we do have all ages here, the little kids, if you start them younger, it's easier to keep them doing this. I'll share with you guys my gratitude jar. This is it.
Oh,
And
see, that's so much prettier than what I would come
it's
up with,
fun.
Sherry.
It's just fun. I just bought it like this, but it came with these little papers. So my kids did this, and it usually wasn't when I was saying, go do this. They just knew it was on the table, and then they would have moments where they would think, oh, I want to write some stuff in there. And I was just looking at them. My kids are older, Pam, like yours. They're 19, 22, and 24. So pulling some of these out is like, oh, so cute. Like,
Mhm.
one was, I'm thankful to cuddle and watch TV with you, Mom. And, one of them would still do that with me, the other one, not so much.
Yeah. I think I have a picture that my now 19-year-old drew. It's actually hanging in a frame in my hallway so I can pass it every day and look at it. That has
I
like
love
little
that.
thank you messages down at the bottom. So yeah.
Aw,
But I do
that's
like the
cute.
idea, Share. I mean, you brought out an important point, which is to try to have understanding the gifts and skills and natural, like interests of of your child, and try to
Mhm.
match a gratitude exercise to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. You have to know your kids and what is gonna
Mhm.
draw them in.
Yep.
Someone is saying that her teens have kind of bad attitudes, and if she thanks them, then they don't do that thing anymore.
Oh,
Totally know what you're talking about. I've seen this a lot in my practice. And that says a lot that you know that about your kids. So you kind of might need to do a little roundabout way of thanking them. I have people do the post-it note challenge, and that's where you just go and you put a little post-it note on their mirror that says thank you instead of face to face. Anything else? And my boys might do it if I'm not looking. Yes. Sometimes you just gotta not look. Give them the
sneaky.
opportunity.
Be
Yes.
sneaky about it.
Be sneaky about it. I love that. Yes. All right. Any last minute questions? You can throw those in the chat box since we're watching that closely in 1 second, because it looks like We do have one. Okay. Here is a question from someone. I have a 17-year-old who is battling clinical anxiety and depression and is on medications currently. We never did any one of these gratitude exercises, but always modeled this in front of her. She wouldn't listen to any of these from me. How can I help her?
Does she, I mean, here's my thoughts, Sherry, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well, but who would she listen to? I suppose would be the first question that I would ask. Is there another mentor or family member or friend that she would listen to participate in gratitude exercises? But what are your thoughts, Sherry?
So a couple things, like you're saying, who will she listen to that maybe can talk to her about gratitude, for instance, but also figuring out, sometimes it's not handing her a gratitude journal and saying, here, you can do this. Sometimes it's doing, like we're talking about, sneakily. Maybe you just wrap it in a pretty little bow and you put it on her bed and let it be her choice. And, you know, that she can kind of look at this, see if she likes it. Or like this pretty box, you know, if she's into those kinds of things, maybe that's what you do. You get that for her and it's hers in her room. Maybe she
Mhm.
needs that privacy of the gratitude, so she doesn't want it to be out in the open. So the follow-up here is she does know most of these, but doesn't practice it. And the key, and Pam, you can jump in on this, is don't give up, keep trying. There's going to be something that will resonate with her. It may be the Calm app or a meditation app or something that she relates to. Is she on her phone? Is she on the computer? Go into the tech world to figure out what can bring that in for her. Maybe an app on her phone. And you may just sit down and ask her, you know, I know that this is something you know about. Is there something we can do to support you to add this into your life?
Mhm. And the only other thought that I had to add to that is I don't know what her interests are right now, but is there a way that you could key into an interest that she already has and create your own gratitude exercise that somehow relates to that thing? And I mean that's very nebulous and sorry for being so nebulous, but I was just the first thought that came to my mind was I like the idea of a bracelet or a necklace for a young woman because that is something that generally young women like jewelry, but I'm not making any assumptions about this particular girl. I'm just saying what would appeal to her that
Yeah,
would be sort of like positive reinforcement for her to want to participate in a gratitude exercise.
right. Thinking outside the box and trying to get creative and figure that out. I love that. I love that. Well, we're up on time. It's about 8 o'clock. I really appreciate everybody coming. And Pam, thank you so much for this information. And we will share your resources that you gave us and your information with in our follow-up email. So everybody, before you jump out, if you can put in the chat box something that was like an aha moment for you or an action step that you're going to take in the next couple of days, maybe even tonight, because of something that Pam has shared with us. We would love to see those thoughts. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you being here. And we have another parent chat coming up soon in a couple of weeks. And we will, again, that'll be in the email follow-up. So we'll get that information to you. Thank you, Pam. I really appreciate you being here. Good night,
My
everyone.
pleasure. Good night, everyone.